Welcome to another episode of The Second Coming. I'm here with Brother T. I'm your host, Jason Keeton. Welcome, Brother T.
Welcome to you, Jason. Nice to see you here.
Right? It looks like we're both men in black today.
Yeah, kind of. I kind of got a navy blue going on, but it's a good look. We coordinated well, evidently.
That's right. You're looking good today. You're looking good.
Thank you very much, sir. So are you. It's good to see your face.
Yeah. Well, I'm smiling and I'm here and I'm loving life. So I had a great weekend with family, and my mom came to visit, and I developed some questions for you.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask the question with all the respect. It was just an observation. So, as you know, my mom is a Lutheran religious person and prides herself in that. So to entertain her, I went to church with her yesterday morning, and when we went to church, I couldn't help notice that the population and the energy of the church was very aged and quite small. And I wanted to contrast a little bit about the spirit awakening of the planet and how it seems so many of us are coming into this idea of the second coming and the idea of being part of God, and how it seems like that core religious following is kind of aging out and falling away.
Okay, let's take that subject on. Let's pause for just a second, do a little attunement here. Let's take a good deep breath. I know who I am in truth. I know what I am in truth. I know how I serve in truth. I am free, I am free, I am free. I am in the upper room. I have come, I have come, I have come. It will be so. Behold, we make all things new. God is, God is, God is. You know, in one of my teachings from Jesus in my past, I believe this came from channeling from Paul Tuttle, but I'm not positive about it. But anyway, it was Jesus teaching. He was teaching A Course in Miracles. But he said that 1,000 years from now, all of the major religions will still be prominent in the world, right? We, here in America, are a very young country to begin with. If we go back and look at the age-old history of Catholicism as an example, and Judaism, you know, any one of those older religions, we can see that they have been around a very, very, very long time. And in the communities around the world, many of the communities around the world, their very early indoctrination is in religion is following, you know, one of those tracks. And so people, their culture is built around church and religion, to a much greater extent than ours is, I believe, than ours is here in the United States. I went to Italy, I've been to Spain, I've been to Germany, I've been to a few countries, not a lot, but a few. And I was blown away by how much influence the Catholic Church, as an example, has in Italy. So we don't have that kind of conditioning or indoctrination into religion here in the United States like our neighbors do and our brothers and sisters in older countries. You know, they date back into the 1200s, 1400s, and even earlier. And, we've been here about 250 years. So our history is much shorter. So the influence and that harder indoctrination, conditioning of religion has not been as progressive and as strong in our country, Jason. So our country is more of a tolerant of people making their own choice. I mean, America is kind of founded in the idea of freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of expression. You can be an atheist and nobody's going to stone you to death. There's places that we could go today, and just because we are not following a certain religion, we would be murdered. We would be stoned in the streets or just murdered, just disappear. Today, I mean, that's happening today. By the religions, not by the country or the government, but by the religions. And that's not a stretch. I mean, it's kind of still very prominent around the world. But here in our country, we are seeing, and I've experienced it as well, we are seeing quite a shift over the last 100 years in particular. In fact, in the last 100 years or so, about the time of the Wright brothers were learning how to get that first airplane off the ground, that's when there was a new process, if you will. It was called Science of Mind, with Ernest Holmes and with other organizations that developed around New Thought religion, which was a modification or a reinterpretation of the meaning of the Bible. What Jesus was teaching was reinterpreted by some of those leaders, Mary Baker Eddy, and this goes back 150 years ago now. But anyway, all that to say that there's been an emergence of people that have found a pathway to spirituality or to enlightenment. I'll use that term, through Buddhism here in our country, through astrology, and yes, there are a few people who have been able to attain that through traditional religions as well. But there's a significant transformation that's happening consciously, and I want to use the term vibrationally on the planet. The vibration of our planet is shifting rapidly and pretty dramatically. So as new people are reincarnating, I should say new people, as people are reincarnating, every incarnation, our soul is gaining is progressing. It's gaining some learning. It's gaining some wisdom. It's growing in its wisdom, and it's growing in its capacity to express and be I'll say it this way, to be the lantern for the light of Christ. The light of Christ shines through the lantern, and so the Christed self, the Christ consciousness, shines through the lantern, if you will, of the soul. The soul becomes, in this analogy, a lantern. The soul is learning. The Christ does not learn. The Christ is, we could say, all-knowing, and that term's a little, a little conditioning baked in even to that, because there's the idea that God is perfect and never makes a mistake, and that all creation occurred at once, evidently in a week's time, and then there's no more creation. No, creation is going on all the time, and God is learning. Now that's kind of a stretch for some people too in traditional religion, that God's not learning, God is all-knowing. Well, God is the all-knowing expression of mind, the all-knowing expression and intelligence of love, if you will. But God is, in fact, learning and growing, and we're a part of that. We're here to help that process, to see what works and what doesn't work. And there are lots of experiments, literally, that the body of God, if I can put it that way, has utilized to see how God can create more of God through form, as an example. That's what we're doing here. We're allowing the possibility of Christ consciousness to be expressed in form. Jesus said, when you see me, you see the Father. He was saying, I am the expression of God in form. In other words, the personality self was out of the picture, and he was expressing as the voice of God. And so that's more of God. So that was a template for us to follow, and we are, right? But this is such a radical shift from the traditional religions that have came with us to this country from Europe, as an example. And so we are highly conditioned, and those, I don't want to call them inappropriate. I mean, people are growing through these processes. I mean, I think you're a lot better off to be going to any church and having some belief in God than you are to deny the existence of God at all, right? I think that's a major step. But all of this to say, Jason, that yes, things are changing and changing rapidly. And as more of us are awakening to the almost unimaginable power of Christ consciousness in the world, we are having more and more of an impact, and more people are feeling it and are being called to it, even though they're not quite sure what they're being called to. I can say it that way. So I think the transformation is absolutely happening, but there are, I'm going to say, several hundred years ahead of us here before this cycle is completed, as well as, you know, the complete transformation of the second coming, you know, creating heaven on earth, and fear becoming completely eliminated on this beautiful planet called Gaia.
I love that. I love that vision. And what does this transformation look like in the meantime? I mean, obviously our human lives don't extend several hundred years. So as we go through this existence, let's say the next 20 years, what kind of visions and vibrations am I going to witness, and then be able to pass on to you know, what are my children and their children going to witness?
Well, that's a really good question. Now let's just consider this, okay? What, I'm just going to say the average person, right? Mm-hmm. If there is such a thing, is experiencing life in form as a human for definitely hundreds of years and very likely thousands of years. So let's just say in your case, Jason, that you've been hanging around since Jesus was here, right? And you were influenced by his life here. And that's why you are on the leading edge today of your own enlightenment, your own awakening. And so what tends to happen is that we go along for hundreds and hundreds of years of reincarnating with very little movement of our consciousness. David Hawkins' work, you know, is doing kinesiology and the map of consciousness, etc. The average person their level of consciousness might increase by 2 or 3 points on a scale of I'm just going to say 20 to 1,000, Jesus being at 1,000, the highest consciousness level that the body can sustain, the highest vibration the body can exist in, and that's a log 10, you know, mathematically. So a big difference between 499 and 500, as an example, or 199 and 200, as an example. Those are threshold levels. Anyway, all that to say that once a person gets to a certain point of advancement, they can have quantum leaps, I call them quantum leaps, of 50 points or 100 points or more in a single lifetime, rather than 1 or 2, right? Because the 1 or 2s can take you 1,000 years per year, per lifetime. So a lifetime, let's just say, is an average of 60 years, maybe more. We could even say 60 or 80. But the point of all that is 20 years out of the last 2,000 years in your life is a pretty short window, right? And no one can really predict what's going to happen tomorrow, much less 20 years from now. But I will tell you that what happens, or what we've come to understand from what's been taught to us from Jesus, because he's been channeling a lot in the last 50 years, a lot, through several mediums. and he's explained a lot of things to us. So I'm not making this up. I'm just sharing with you what Jesus has taught me, from the resources that I have available to me. They're available to all of us, but I'm curious. And I study pretty prolifically. And the point is that, he says that once you get to a certain point in the lifetime in which you are likely to attain enlightenment, that there is a very rapid acceleration of your consciousness in that last lifetime. And once you reach a certain level of consciousness, I'm going to call it fifth dimensional consciousness, you're not going to reincarnate here because you've done what you came here to do, right? You have become enlightened. And you have removed the limits of your consciousness, and there are many, many more dimensions. In my Father's house are many, many mansions. There are many more levels of dimensional exploration and growth. We never quit growing. And eventually we become potentially, and I find this very interesting, at some point, Jason, you may find yourself, as Jesus is responsible, if you can allow me to say it this way, for the consciousness of our planet Earth and for the growth of planet Earth and the progression of creating heaven on earth, more of God. That's basically his charge and his responsibility as a super soul here on planet Earth. But as you evolve and grow, eventually you will have your own planet in this multiverse, that you're responsible for the millions and billions of people on that planet and helping them to achieve higher level of consciousness. That would be your charge, your responsibility, right? So it's not like, we're just going to go be in the happy land, on a cloud somewhere when we die. No, we don't ever die to begin with. We are going to continue to grow and evolve and create and be a bigger and bigger expression and a bigger and bigger part of the creation of more of God. So in the next 20 years, a lot can happen, right? But it's not happening to you. It's only available to happen through you as you allow it by removing the obstacles. Jesus says it this way in the Course in Miracles, Jason. Removing the obstacles to the awareness of the presence of love in your life, in your belief system, in your thought system, in your mind, and in who you be.
I love that. I love that explanation. And it also makes us realize, like, there's a saying, don't sweat the small stuff, right? When we're projecting out hundreds of years from now of what this Christ consciousness is, sometimes the little fender bender or the argument you wish you didn't have seems pretty small. And even
Absolutely.
if you look out 20 years, it seems pretty small.
Yeah.
And to be present and be witness to this beautiful heaven on earth that we are creating right now is it's a blessing. It's a blessing for me to be here with you.
Right. Well, there's honestly, there have been other planets where Spirit has done this kind of thing, and they adjust if I can say it this way, the level of fear that's allowed to push people forward into a conscious awakening versus the imbalance with the amount of love that is created there. And on those situations, people would attain enlightenment much easier. It's been very difficult here on planet Earth because fear kind of ran away. They gave, and I'm just telling you what spirits told us, okay? But they've given fear a more, in the balance between fear and love, fear had a bigger power level, if you will, on planet Earth, because as we overcome these obstacles to the awareness and presence of love, as we overcome fear, this is where the power of we're creating more of God. This is where we are creating more love comes through us, etc. And our souls are growing and learning through this experience. And so while there was the potential to create more seed energy, love energy, from the mix that planet Earth was set up as, it hasn't worked well because fear has run rampant on our planet. And so I've shared this before, and at the risk of repeating myself or maybe letting the cat out of the bag, so to speak, there's been an adjustment that's been made since the millennium because prophets had said that at the end of the Mayan calendar, which was right around the year 2000, humanity was going to destroy itself. And we have the capacity to do that. And that was the prophecy. But we passed a marker back prior to that, a test, if you will. And we passed a marker because we said, no, we don't want to go through another, Noah's Ark situation kind of thing and start over again. No, and I think Jesus bringing A Course in Miracles had a lot to do with it because our consciousness has evolved dramatically since that one. It was the introduction to a new way of being, a new way of seeing our relationship with God and our understanding of ourselves and who we are. And so a lot has changed, and so we passed a marker, so to speak, and so instead of annihilation of the planet and starting over again, which was most likely the highest, that had the highest potential for us, up until I'm going to say since the harmonic conversion in the 1980s, 1987. So we're in a kind of a new area, right? And there's still a potential, but to help things along, Spirit kind of set a boundary and said, okay, from this point on, and I'm just going to use the millennium, the year 2000 as a marker, and just as a example, and that people that are not attaining at least a certain level of consciousness on this planet will not be reincarnating here now. Mm-hmm. And so the level of fear is going to be recalibrated and rebalanced. More love, less fear, more love, less fear in every generation that is reincarnating on this planet. So within 100 years, this planet is going to be a completely different place to be. Mm-hmm. Substantially different. And the second coming it absolutely is underway. But it's not a God created all that exists and everything that happened according to the Bible in 1 week, right? No, it took billions. It still takes billions of years. Creation and evolution are one and the same, really, and creation is occurring in every now. And so we're never going to die. There is no such thing as death. Those are ideas and constructs that we've aligned ourselves to so that we experience those things. But all I'm trying to get to is things are going to change here pretty dramatically in the next 100 years. But for me personally, I would be surprised if I live another 20 years on this planet. But it's okay if I do. I mean, I'm not in a hurry to leave, but I am happy to graduate from fear, and once you attain a certain level, you don't reincarnate here anymore. There's much more life and love to experience in the universe of God.
I love that. And when you say there's more, like if we don't incarnate on here, does our spirit, does our soul take form somewhere else, or do we just have a new assignment that's hard for us to understand?
That's a good question. Your soul is what you are. You're not a body. You never were. This is an illusory construct, right? It's an experiment of creating more of God in form, overcoming fear, and awakening to the love that you are. So we have a default operating system called the ego that we begin with, which is constructed on the foundation of fear and guilt. And then the soul grows through incarnations and eventually overrides the ego construct, the thought system of fear, and the thought system, God's thought system, the thought system of love, is then who we express as. I know who I am. I am the energy of the Creator in action. I am love in action. That is the soul. That is also your Christ self, right? That is channeling through the soul. So while the soul is learning, the Christ self is the mind of knowing. It's been called the Holy Instant. It's been called the Holy Spirit. So all that to say, it gets a little wonky to try to even understand it, much less figuring it out. It's taken me a long time. I'm still working diligently every day to get more clarity on all of it, because I want to help people understand it. And the teacher is the learner, right? So I'm
Absolutely.
teaching so I can learn. But the point of all that is that your natural physical, if you want to call it that, but I'm going to say the natural image of you is about the size of a house here in America, right? A human house. So your actual image in the non-physical is about the size of a house, and it's just spinning lights. You're spinning lights. You are mind, right? And we see each other and we recognize each other, and there's no words, because in that realm of consciousness there's only knowing, and then we interact with each other. I mean, we can't even articulate it in words. So we don't go from a physical form to some other physical form in heaven, because heaven is just an idea that we are trying to manifest here on earth in form. But in the world of the soul, if you will, in the mind of God, everything is a mind. So the best analogy I can give you of it is, when you went to sleep last night, you had a dream. And you believed that you were a body, you had some kind of an experience. You might remember it when you woke up this morning. I had a dream this morning. It was really intense for a very brief few moments, right before I woke up. And I thought I was somewhere that I was not. It was all in my mind. I wasn't in a physical body, really, and I'm really not now. This is a very dreamlike experience. So when you reflect back on when you were young and think about your first grade or third grade or whatever experiences, it's very dreamlike, right? And nobody else could even knows that it exists except you. It's just your experience in your mind. It's all mind. And everything that is within God. Everything is within God, right? Everything is in God. And so everything is God. And that's the part of where we graduate through the evolution, attaining the self of evolved consciousness, is that we begin to see, because God is love, we begin to see God in all things, in everyone. And so we see love. So all we're really experiencing is love, and we have an energetic impact that changes everything we experience. So it's convoluted. It's a little, it's kind of like trying to teach my cat to drive my car. My ego can't really comprehend it. But we're getting great instructions from our guides, from Jesus, and from our loved ones.
I love that. And just to wrap it up, Brother T, you mentioned like the fifth dimension. I've heard that before, but kind of explain to me. We're living in the third dimension now, and that doesn't really mean like I touch my coffee mug and I see it in 3D. What does it mean, like the dimensions that you're talking about?
Well, I'm speaking of consciousness here, not form.
Right.
Our consciousness allows us to experience form in a third dimensional way, right? We see depth, we see volume, and we see width, etc., and height. And but you also have what we got 5 senses. You also have what's been called sixth sense, right? Sometimes you might be thinking about your mom and suddenly their phone rings and she's calling you, right? In other words, you're already in a sixth sense. It's not a physical dimensional experience. It's not a three-dimensional experience. There's no form in it, right? It's consciousness. So when I'm talking about third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, and sixth dimension, I'm talking about consciousness. So third dimensional consciousness is victim consciousness. Fourth dimensional consciousness is manifester, manipulator consciousness, but at least we're operating in integrity there and at a level above integrity or above. And fifth dimensional consciousness would be equated to that threshold I talked about, 499 versus 500 on Hawkins scale. That 500, you are now in a channel consciousness. That's fifth dimensional consciousness. And then sixth dimensional consciousness is mystic consciousness. Okay? So once you ever get to the point of being above that third dimensional consciousness of victim consciousness and become in the manifestor manipulator consciousness, that's fourth dimension. In other words, you see people in your life and you may not be channeling, you may not be in the fifth dimension yet, but you see people and have people and know people in your life that you see that are a part of you. You see yourself in them, and you see them as you see yourself. You love them and care for them, right? And that can be children, parents, family, always comes into play, and that level of vibration, right? But that's what I'm talking about. And I know, because we see everything linearly, we see everything through time, we try to the ego mind tries to make everything fit in that box because that's all it can actually understand. But what we're really talking about here is attaining levels of consciousness dimensionally and transcend physical form altogether. Ultimately, that is the goal. We have come and we have created more of God. We have brought love to this planet and those here, and we have served our purpose, and we graduate. We don't have to stay in the third grade forever. We don't have to stay in the fifth grade forever. We don't have to stay in high school forever, hopefully. And we can graduate and go to higher levels of learning.
And I'm always learning from you, Brother T. So I thank you for your wisdom, and I thank you for your guidance every week here on The Second Coming. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank all of you for joining us. And Brother T, I thank you for leading us today. So I will see you on another episode next week of The Second Coming.
Thank you, Jason. I love you, my brother. And I see you there too. I'm really already looking forward to our next conversation.